I thought I knew what happiness looked like. For 8 years, I believed I was living it. My name is Isabella, and I was married to Derek Manning, heir to the Manning family fortune. We lived in his grandmother's sprawling estate in Connecticut, a house that felt more like a museum, with its marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors who seemed to judge my every move. Derek's grandmother, Eleanor Manning, was the matriarch who ruled over everything. She was 83 years old, sharp as a blade, and held the family purse strings with an iron grip. I'll admit, our relationship was complicated. She never thought I was good enough for her precious grandson. I came from a middle-class family in Ohio. My father was a mechanic, my mother a school teacher. In Eleanor's world, that made me practically a peasant, but I tried. Oh, how I tried. I attended every charity gala, smiled at every condescending comment, and learned which fork to use for the salad course. I thought if I just proved myself worthy, if I just showed her I loved Derek genuinely, she'd eventually accept me. Derek always told me not to worry about it. She'll come around, he'd say, kissing my forehead. When we have children, everything will change. That is what kept me going through the years of cold shoulders and backhanded compliments. The promise of children, of a real family we'd been trying for 2 years, and when I finally got pregnant last spring, I thought this was it. This was when I'd finally become a real Manning. Eleanor's attitude did shift when I told her the news. Her steel gray eyes softened, just a fraction, and she actually smiled. About time, she said, which from her was practically a warm embrace. She started including me in conversations about family traditions, about which room would make the best nursery, about the Manning legacy that my child would inherit. For the first time in 8 years, I felt like I belonged. The pregnancy was difficult. I was sick constantly, exhausted, and by my 7th month, I was on bed rest. Derek became increasingly distant, claiming work stress. He'd leave early in the morning and come home late, sometimes smelling of perfume that wasn't mine. When I questioned him, he'd sigh and say I was being hormonal, that the pregnancy was making me paranoid. Then, 3 weeks before my due date, Eleanor had her stroke. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I found her collapsed in the garden, still clutching the roses she'd been cutting. The paramedics said if I hadn't found her when I did, she wouldn't have made it. She spent 2 weeks in the hospital, slipping in and out of consciousness, before she finally passed away on a quiet Thursday afternoon. I was devastated. Despite our rocky relationship, I had come to love the stubborn old woman. She was the closest thing to a grandmother my unborn child would have had. But Derek seemed almost relieved. At the funeral, while I wept openly, he maintained a stoic composure that seemed more appropriate for a business meeting than his grandmother's burial. She lived a full life, he kept saying to the mourners. She wouldn't want us to grieve too long. 2 weeks after the funeral, our daughter Emma was born. She was perfect, 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, and Derek's blue eyes. For a moment holding her in the hospital, I thought everything would be okay. We were a family now, the Manning legacy would continue through this beautiful little girl. But Derek barely looked at her. He stood by the window, checking his phone, while I struggled with breastfeeding and sleepless nights. Babies are so demanding. He'd say when Emma cried, maybe we should hire a nanny. It was 6 weeks after Emma's birth that Derek came home with the papers. I was in the nursery, finally getting Emma to sleep after hours of crying, when I heard Derek's car in the driveway. It was only 3 in the afternoon, unusually early for him. I heard his footsteps on the marble stairs, heard him pause outside the nursery door. When he finally entered, his face was cold, distant. Isabella, we need to talk. Something in his tone made my blood freeze. I carefully placed Emma in her crib and followed him to his study, a room that had once been Eleanor's domain, filled with leather, bound books and the scent of old money. Derek sat behind the massive oak desk, a manila envelope in his hands. He looked at me like I was a stranger. I am filing for divorce. The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the back of the chair to keep from falling. What, Derek? What are you talking about? It is over, Isabella. It has been for a while now. His voice was matter of fact, as if he were discussing the weather. I've already moved out my personal belongings. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. But the baby Emma, she is your daughter. I'll pay child support, of course, but I want full custody. I stared at him, unable to process what I was hearing. Full custody, Derek. She is barely 6 weeks old. She is breastfeeding. I'll provide for a wet nurse if necessary. The coldness in his voice was terrifying. This wasn't the man I'd married, the man who'd whispered sweet promises about our future together. This was a stranger wearing Derek's face. I don't understand, I whispered. We just lost your grandmother. We just had a baby. Why now? Why like this? Derek opened the manila envelope and pulled out several documents. Because now that Eleanor is gone, there is no reason to continue this charade. Charade? You think I married you for love? He laughed. A harsh sound that echoed in the book-lined room. Isabella, you were convenient. A sweet naive girl who was so grateful for attention from a Manning that you never asked uncomfortable questions. The room spun around me. I don't. What are you saying? I am saying our marriage was a business arrangement. Eleanor insisted I marry someone respectable before she'd name me as her sole heir. You fit the bill perfectly. Middle, class, wholesome, not smart enough to be a threat. Each word was a dagger to my heart. That is not true. You said you loved me. I said what I needed to say. He stood up, straightening his tie. But Eleanor's dead now, and her will is quite clear. Everything goes to me. The house, the business, the investments, all of it. You, my dear, get nothing. But Emma will be provided for, as befits a Manning heir. You, however, are no longer needed. I felt like I was drowning. This is insane. Derek, please, think about what you are doing. We're a family. His voice cut through my pleading like ice. We never were a family. You were a temporary necessity. Now that necessity has run its course. He walked around the desk and handed me the divorce papers. Sign these. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. My hands shook as I looked at the documents. The terms were brutal. I would get no alimony, no claim to any Manning property, and Derek would have primary custody of Emma, with me granted only supervised visitation twice a month. I won't sign this, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. I'll fight you. Emma needs her mother. With what money? Derek's smile was cruel. Your checking account was closed this morning. Your credit cards have been cancelled. You have no job, no assets, no family money to fall back on. What exactly are you going to fight with? The reality of my situation crashed over me like a wave. I had nothing. For 8 years I'd been completely financially dependent on Derek and the Manning family. I had no career, no savings of my own, nowhere to go. You can't do this, I whispered. But even as I said it, I knew he could. He was doing it. I can and I am. You have until tomorrow to sign those papers. If you cooperate, I'll allow you to say goodbye to Emma. If you don't, he shrugged. Security will escort you off the property, and you'll never see her again. That night, I sat in the master bedroom, my bedroom for 8 years, holding Emma and crying. How had I been so blind? How had I missed the signs? Looking back, I could see them now, the way Derek had always kept me dependent, the way he'd discouraged me from working or making friends outside his social circle, the way he'd isolated me from my own family by slowly poisoning me against them. Eleanor had been the key to everything. As long as she was alive, Derek had needed me to maintain appearances, but with her gone, I signed the papers the next morning. Derek didn't even look up from his newspaper when I handed them over. Smart choice, he said. Security will help you pack. The next 3 months were the darkest of my life. I found a tiny studio apartment, in Hartford, 40 minutes away from the estate, and took a job waitressing at a diner. It was minimum wage work, barely enough to cover rent and food, but it was all I could get without a recent work history. Twice a month, I was allowed to see Emma for 2 hours, always supervised by a court-appointed monitor. She was growing so fast, changing so much, and I was missing all of it. Derek had hired a nanny, a cold, efficient woman named Mrs. Patterson, who treated me like an intruder during my visits. The baby doesn't seem to know you, Mrs. Patterson would say with barely concealed satisfaction. Perhaps these visits are more distressing than beneficial. I was losing my daughter, piece by piece, visit by visit. My lawyer, a overworked public defender named Mike Chen, was sympathetic but realistic. Without resources, Mrs. Manning, Our options are limited. The prenup you signed was ironclad, and Derek's legal team is formidable. The best we can hope for is to maintain your visitation rights. But she is my daughter, I'd plead. Doesn't that count for something? In theory, yes. In practice, family court tends to favor the parent who can provide better financial stability. I felt trapped in a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. It was during this dark period that I received an unexpected visitor. I was working the late shift at the diner when a well-dressed elderly man approached my table. He was tall and distinguished, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Mrs. Manning, Isabella Manning? I nearly dropped the coffee pot. Yes? My name is Harold Whitmore. I was Mrs. Eleanor Manning's attorney. He glanced around the nearly empty diner. I wonder if we might speak privately. My heart pounded. I am working. I spoke with your manager. She has agreed to let you take a break. We sat in a corner booth, and Harold pulled a leather briefcase onto the table. I must apologize for the delay in contacting you. There were certain complications regarding Mrs. Manning's estate that needed to be resolved. Complications. Yes. You see, Mrs. Manning had very specific instructions about her will, instructions that, frankly, have taken some time to verify and implement. I didn't understand. But Derek said everything went to him. He said it was clear. Harold's eyebrows rose. Mr. Derek Manning told you that? Yes, he said the will left everything to him as the sole heir. Harold was quiet for a long moment, studying me with those kind eyes. Then he opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick document. Mrs. Manning. I am afraid your husband has not been entirely truthful with you about the terms of his grandmother's will. The world tilted. What do you mean? Eleanor Manning's will is indeed very specific, but it contains what we call an inheritance clause, a condition that must be met before the primary bequest takes effect. My mouth went dry. What kind of condition? Harold opened the document to a page marked with several sticky notes. The clause states, and I quote, "My estate in its entirety shall pass to my beloved grandson Derek only if he remains childless at the time of my death. However, should Derek father a legitimate heir, a true blood descendant, said heir shall inherit my estate upon reaching the age of majority, with Derek serving only as trustee until that time. Furthermore, the child's mother shall serve as co-trustee, with equal rights and responsibilities in managing the estate." I stared at him, unable to process what I was hearing. I don't. What does that mean? Harold's smile was gentle, but his words were earth-shaking. It means, Mrs. Manning, that your daughter Emma is the true heir to the Manning fortune, and as her mother, you have equal legal authority over one of the largest estates in Connecticut. The diner seemed to spin around me, but Derek said, he said Eleanor left everything to him. Mr. Derek Manning inherited nothing more than a trustee position, which he can only maintain if he remains married to Emma's mother, you, or if you voluntarily relinquish your rights. Harold leaned forward. The divorce he initiated has actually triggered another clause, one that grants you sole custody of Emma, and complete control of the estate, until she comes of age. I felt like I might faint. That is impossible. Derek would never have divorced me if he knew about the inheritance clause. No, he wouldn't have, but I suspect he never read the full will. Eleanor was quite clever about burying the most important provisions, in legal language that would be easy to overlook, if one were simply skimming for the bottom line. Harold pulled out another document. There is more. Eleanor left specific instructions that this clause was only to be revealed after any legal proceedings regarding custody or divorce had been initiated. She wanted to be certain that if Derek's true character ever emerged, you and Emma would be protected. Tears started flowing down my cheeks. She knew what kind of man he was. Eleanor Manning was many things, but she was not a fool. She watched her grandson carefully over the years. She also watched you. Harold's voice was warm. She came to respect your strength, your dedication to family. That is why she included specific language protecting you and any children you might have. I wiped my eyes with a shaking hand. What happens now? Now, Mrs. Manning, we begin the process of enforcing the actual terms of the will. Derek must be informed that he is not the heir he believed himself to be. The estate must be transferred into trust for Emma, with you as the primary trustee, and Harold smiled. You and Emma must move back into the family home, as is your right as trustees of the Manning estate. Back to the house. It belongs to Emma now, Mrs. Manning. Derek has been living there illegally since the will was probated. He'll need to find other accommodations. The next few days passed in a blur of legal meetings and paperwork. Harold worked quickly and efficiently to set everything in motion. The morning we were scheduled to confront Derek with the truth, I stood in front of my tiny bathroom mirror, trying to calm my nerves. I had spent 3 months believing I was powerless, beaten, discarded. Now I was about to walk back into that mansion, not as Derek's dependent ex-wife, but as the guardian of its true owner. Harold picked me up in his Mercedes, Emma's car seat already installed in the back. My daughter babbled happily during the drive, unaware that her entire life was about to change. Again, the Manning estate looked exactly as I remembered it, imposing and elegant in the morning sunlight. But this time, as we pulled up the circular drive, I wasn't approaching it as a guest, or even as Derek's wife. I was coming home. Harold rang the doorbell, and we waited. I could hear footsteps inside, then Derek's voice. Who is it? Harold Whitmore, Mrs. Manning's attorney. I need to speak with you regarding the estate. The door opened and Derek appeared, looking annoyed. He was dressed in an expensive suit, obviously preparing to leave for work. His eyes fell on me, then on Emma in her carrier, and his expression darkened. What is she doing here? Isabella, you are not scheduled for visitation until next week, Mr. Manning. Harold interrupted smoothly. If we could speak inside, there are some important matters regarding your grandmother's will that need clarification. Derek looked suspicious, but he stepped aside to let us in. We walked into the grand foyer, where I had once felt so small and out of place. Now, knowing the truth, the marble floors and crystal chandeliers looked different. They weren't symbols of Derek's power over me. They were Emma's inheritance. I thought everything with the will was settled, Derek said, leading us into the living room. I don't understand why you need to involve Isabella. Please sit down, Mr. Manning. Harold's voice carried an authority that made Derek comply immediately. There has been a significant misunderstanding about the terms of your grandmother's bequest. Derek's face was wary. What kind of misunderstanding? Harold opened his briefcase with deliberate precision. When we last met, you were quite eager to finalize the estate transfer. You signed the preliminary documents without requesting a full reading of the will. I didn't need a full reading. Grandmother always made it clear that everything would go to me. Yes, she did tell you that, but Mrs. Manning was a careful woman, Mr. Manning. She built conditions into her will that she never discussed with anyone, conditions that have now come to pass. Derek's confidence was starting to crack. What conditions? Harold pulled out the will and opened it to the marked pages. Your grandmother's estate was contingent on you remaining childless at the time of her death. Derek went very still. What? The inheritance clause clearly states that should you father a legitimate heir, that child, not you, becomes the primary beneficiary of the Manning estate. The color drained from Derek's face. That can't be right. I am afraid it is. Harold's voice was steady and professional. Furthermore, your recent divorce from Isabella has triggered additional clauses that grant her sole legal authority over the estate as Emma's guardian and trustee. Derek shot to his feet. This is ridiculous. Grandmother would never. Your grandmother was quite specific about her intentions, Mr. Manning. She wanted to ensure that the Manning legacy went to a true blood heir, not someone who might squander it. Harold's tone remained calm, but there was steel underneath. She also wanted to protect that heir's mother from any unscrupulous behavior. Derek began pacing, running his hands through his hair. This is insane. You can't just spring this on me. I've been living here for months. I've made plans, investments, all of which you made while believing you owned property that in fact belongs to your daughter. Harold turned to me. Mrs. Manning, as Emma's trustee, you have the right to take immediate possession of the estate. Mr. Derek Manning must vacate within 30 days. I looked at Derek, really looked at him 3 months ago. This man had held all the power. He had cast me out, taken my daughter, left me with nothing. He had been so confident, so cruel in his certainty that he had won. Now, he looked small, desperate. This won't stand up in court, Derek said, his voice rising. I'll fight this. I'll prove that document is fraudulent. By all means. Contest it, Harold replied mildly, though I should warn you that doing so will be expensive, and you'll need to find your own legal representation. The estate's lawyers work for Emma now. Derek's face was turning red. Isabella, you can't be serious about this. We can work something out. We don't have to be enemies. I stood up slowly, Emma still sleeping in her carrier beside me. When I spoke, my voice was steady and clear. Derek, you told me our marriage was a charade. You said I was a temporary necessity who had outlived her usefulness. You took my daughter from me and tried to erase me from her life. I picked up Emma's carrier, feeling strength flow through me with every word. I am not your enemy. I am just no longer your victim. Derek's desperation was palpable. Isabella, please. Think about what you are doing. We can share the house. We can co-parent Emma properly. I made mistakes, but we can fix this. The time for fixing things was before you chose to destroy our family. I turned to Harold. What do we need to do to change the locks? Harold smiled. I'll have that arranged this afternoon. Derek lunged forward, grabbing my arm. You can't do this to me. I am a Manning. This is my family's legacy. No, I said, gently but firmly pulling away from his grip. This is Emma's legacy, and I'll make sure she grows up knowing the difference between inheriting power and earning respect. The legal aftermath was swift and decisive. Derek's lawyers tried to contest the will, but Harold had been preparing for exactly that possibility for months. Eleanor had been thorough in her planning, consulting with multiple legal experts to ensure her inheritance clause was ironclad. Within 6 weeks, Derek was forced to vacate the estate. He found a small apartment in the city. His lifestyle dramatically reduced now that he had to live on his actual salary, rather than family wealth. His law firm, discovering he had never actually owned the connections and properties he'd claimed, quietly encouraged him to seek employment elsewhere. Meanwhile, Emma and I settled into our new life as trustees of the Manning estate. I hired a new nanny, a warm grandmother type woman named Mrs. Rodriguez, who actually smiled when Emma giggled. I enrolled in estate management classes, determined to be worthy of the trust Eleanor had placed in me. The house felt different now. Where once the portraits of stern ancestors had seemed judgmental, now they felt protective, guardians of a legacy that my daughter would someday inherit. I had the walls repainted in warm colors, filled the rooms with Emma's laughter, and slowly began to make the mansion feel like a real home. 3 months after moving back in, I received an unexpected letter. It was in Eleanor's handwriting, dated just days before her stroke. My dear Isabella, it read. If you are reading this, then my suspicions about Derek's character have proven correct, and you have discovered the truth about my will. I want you to know that the inheritance clause was not born from distrust of you, but from my growing respect for your strength and integrity. I watched you during those 8 years, saw how you endured Derek's coldness and my own initial harshness with grace. I saw how you put family above personal comfort, love above convenience. These are the qualities that make a true Manning, not blood, but character. Emma is fortunate to have you as her mother. The Manning fortune is fortunate to have you as its guardian. Use both wisely and never doubt that you earned every bit of the security and power you now possess. With deepest respect and affection, Eleanor Manning. Peace. Check the library safe behind the Shakespeare collection. The combination is Emma's birth date. You'll find documents there that will help you understand just how extensive your daughter's inheritance truly is. I found the safe that evening. Inside were deeds, stock certificates, and bank documents that revealed the Manning fortune was even larger than I had imagined. But more than that, I found letters, dozens of them, written by Eleanor over the years, documenting Derek's increasingly concerning behavior, and her growing certainty that he was not fit to inherit her life's work. The final letter was addressed to Emma, to be given to her on her 18th birthday. In it, Eleanor explained her decision to bypass Derek entirely, ensuring that the Manning legacy would pass to someone who understood both its privileges and its responsibilities. That night, as I tucked Emma into her crib in the nursery that was rightfully hers, I thought about the woman I had been just months before, desperate, powerless, convinced I was worthless. Then, I thought about the woman I was becoming, strong, independent, the guardian of both my daughter's future and her great-grandmother's legacy. Derek had tried to throw me away like garbage, convinced that his wealth and status made him untouchable. He had seen me as weak, as nothing more than a temporary convenience to be discarded when I was no longer useful. He had been wrong about everything. As for Derek himself, I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had moved to California trying to rebuild his career and his life. Sometimes I felt sorry for him. He had lost everything because he had never learned the difference between having power and earning it. But mostly, I was grateful. His cruelty had been the key that unlocked Eleanor's true gift. Not just financial security, but the knowledge that I was stronger than I had ever imagined. Today as I write this, Emma is 2 years old. She toddles through the halls of her ancestral home with the confidence of someone who truly belongs there. She laughs without reservation, loves without fear, and trusts that the world will treat her with kindness, because that is how she is being raised. I never remarried. I discovered I didn't need a man to feel complete, to feel worthy, to feel powerful. The Manning name belongs to Emma now, but the strength that will help her carry it, that comes from me. Sometimes young women write to me, having heard my story through various channels. They're often trapped in situations similar to what I experienced, isolated, dependent, convinced they have no options. I tell them what I wish someone had told me. You are never as powerless as someone else wants you to believe you are. Eleanor Manning taught me that real power isn't inherited. It is claimed. It is standing up when someone tries to knock you down. It is refusing to accept no, when you know you deserve better. It is understanding that the strongest weapon you have isn't money or status or connections. It is the absolute certainty that you matter. Derek thought he had won when he had me thrown out of what he believed was his house. He thought he had the final word when he signed those divorce papers with such confidence. But the most important words in Eleanor Manning's will weren't about money or property. They were about recognizing strength where others see weakness, about ensuring that power goes to those who understand its true value. In the end, Derek didn't lose because he was cruel. Though he was. He didn't lose because he was greedy. Though he was that too. He lost because he fundamentally misunderstood what the Manning legacy was really about. It was never about the money. It was about building something lasting, something meaningful, something that would make the world a little bit better. And now it is Emma's turn to carry that legacy forward, with her mother beside her every step of the way. But did you like this story? Tell us in the comments which city you are listening from. If you enjoyed this dramatic tale of betrayal and resurrection, please support us with a super thanks so we can continue bringing you more incredible life stories, like this one. Thank you so much for your support. We look forward to your comments about Isabella's amazing journey on the screen. You can see 2 new life stories that we highly recommend. There is so much more content on our channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story, with love and respect. **.